Before you scroll past, imagine the feel of rough rope cutting into your wrists, the cold dread of being completely powerless, and the sound of 5 people laughing at your terror. This is the story of how a single, cruel afternoon was shattered by the arrival of one man, a man who held a power those bullies could never have imagined. If you're ready for a story of justice that feels like a thunderclap, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the channel. And if you love stories that deliver a gut punch of reality and redemption, consider subscribing. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. The air in the small town of Oak Creek was always stillest in the hour after school let out. On this particular Tuesday, with a thick blanket of gray clouds pressing down, the stillness felt heavy, almost ominous. The sprawling athletic fields behind Oak Creek High School were usually bustling with life, but now they were mostly empty, save for the distant figures of a few cross-country runners pounding the track that circled the football field. It was in this vast, open space that a scene of quiet horror was playing out. 5 figures, clad in the blue and yellow varsity jackets of the school's various teams, moved with a swagger that spoke of unquestioned dominion. They were the kings and queens of these grounds, their confidence a fortress built on social status and a cruel sort of popularity. At their center was Brad, his blonde hair perfectly messy, his grin a flash of white in the gloomy light. He held a wooden baseball bat, not with menace, but with a casual familiarity, tapping it against his palm as he walked. They were circling someone, like a pack of wolves closing in on wounded prey. Their prey was a girl named Alara. She was 19, but her slight frame and the fresh, painful vulnerability in her eyes made her seem younger. She was the new girl, a status that in a town like Oak Creek was a sentence in itself. Her long brown hair was half obscuring her face, a face marked by a thin, pale scar that ran from just below her left eye down to her jawline. It was a relic of a different life, a story no one here had bothered to ask about. She wore a faded green military-style sweater and blue jeans, clothes that were meant to be armor, to help her blend into the background, but today they had failed her. Brad's voice cut through the quiet, sharp and mocking. "Think you're too good for us, Scar? Too good to even talk?" Alara said nothing. She kept her head down, her green eyes fixed on the scuffed toes of her boots, hoping silence would be her shield. It never was. They herded her toward a large, ancient oak tree that stood sentinel at the edge of the field, its bare branches clawing at the gray sky. It was a known spot, a place where detentions were served and secret cigarettes were smoked. But today, it was about to become a stage for a much darker ritual. "I think she needs a timeout," Brad said, his voice dripping with false concern. A chance to think about her attitude. Laughter erupted from the group. Alara's heart began to hammer against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. "Please," she whispered, the words so soft it was almost swallowed by the wind. "Please, don't." Her plea only seemed to excite them more. Mike produced a thick coil of rough, manila rope from his backpack, the kind used for tying down cargo. The sight of it made Alara's blood run cold. This wasn't a spontaneous prank, this was premeditated. This was a lesson they intended to teach. Unseen by any of them, a dark blue police SUV with the Oak Creek Police Department emblem on the door had turned onto the access road that ran along the far side of the athletic fields. It moved slowly, almost idly, its heavy tires crunching on the gravel. Inside, the man behind the wheel was not on a call. He was just driving, taking the long way back to the station, using the quiet time to think, to decompress from a morning filled with budget meetings and administrative paperwork. His name was Ben Carter, and he had been the chief of police for just under 3 months. He was still learning the rhythms of this quiet town, still mapping its streets and its secrets. His eyes, a steely, experienced blue, scanned the familiar landscape without real focus. He saw the cross-country team on the track, the empty bleachers, the giant oak tree in the distance. And then his gaze sharpened. He squinted. What was that at the base of the tree? A pile of rags, a discarded practice dummy. He slowed the SUV to a crawl. He reached for the pair of binoculars he kept in the center console. Lifting them to his eyes, he adjusted the focus. The scene at the tree snapped into a clarity so sharp it felt like a physical blow. It wasn't a pile of rags. It was a person. A girl, tied to the tree with thick rope. And she wasn't moving. His cop brain began running through scenarios. A hazing ritual gone too far. A prank. And then he saw the group of kids in Letterman jackets standing around her. He saw one of them, a blond boy, holding a baseball bat. He saw them laughing. The blood in his veins went from warm to ice cold in an instant. This wasn't a hazing. This was a predation. A cold, calculated act of bullying. His grip tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. He was about to hit the lights and siren, to roar across the field and put an end to this, when something about the girl made him pause. He adjusted the binoculars again, zeroing in on her slumped form, the long brown hair, the green sweater his wife had bought for her last Christmas, the way she held her head, even in defeat. And then, as if sensing his gaze from 1,000 yards away, she lifted her head. The binoculars brought her face into heartbreaking focus. The tears, the terror, and the scar. The scar he had been staring at in a hospital room just over a year ago, promising her that everything would be okay, that they were safe now. The world narrowed to a single, piercing point of light. The air was sucked from his lungs. That was his daughter. His Alara. The girl he had sworn to protect from all the monsters in the world, tied to a tree like an animal, being tormented by a pack of kids while he watched through a lens. A roaring sound filled his head, a tempest of pure, undiluted rage so powerful it was blinding. For a single, terrifying second, Ben Carter, the man, the father, wanted to do things that would have ended his career, his freedom, his life. He saw himself crossing that field not as an officer of the law, but as an instrument of vengeance. The feeling was primal, a seismic shift in the very foundation of his soul. But then, decades of training, of discipline, of oath-taking, reasserted themselves. The storm in his eyes didn't recede, but it crystallized into something far more dangerous, a cold, focused, and absolute fury. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing a frantic father. He would give them the terror of facing the full, silent, and unforgiving weight of the law. He put the SUV back into drive. He did not turn on the lights. He did not turn on the siren. He simply rolled forward, a predator stalking its prey, the electric engine of the vehicle making barely a whisper as it glided over the grass. Back at the tree, the bullies were still oblivious, basking in their perceived power. Brad was using the baseball bat to gently lift the hair away from Alara's face. "What's the matter? Scaredy, cat?" "Cat got your tongue," he mocked. "I thought you were tough. I heard you came from some rough place." "Doesn't look so tough to me." Alara just stared at him, her green eyes now devoid of tears, filled instead with a hollow, exhausted defiance. She had nothing left to give them. It was in that moment that Chloe, who was still filming, lowered her phone slightly, her attention caught by a movement in her periphery. She frowned. Guys," she said, her voice losing its mocking edge. The others ignored her. "Guys," she said, more urgently. Jake turned, annoyed. "What?" And then he saw it too. A dark blue police SUV was moving across the field toward them. It wasn't speeding. It wasn't flashing. It was just approaching. Slowly, deliberately, like a shark cutting through water. A ripple of unease went through the group. Their laughter died abruptly. This was not part of the plan. Cops didn't usually come out here. Mike took a hesitant step backward. "Maybe we should go," he mumbled. But Brad, ever the arrogant leader, puffed out his chest. "Relax," he said, though his voice had lost some of its bravado. "It's just old Miller. My dad plays golf with him. He'll tell us to cut it out and we'll untie her. No big deal." He tried to grin, but it looked more like a grimace. He dropped the baseball bat onto the grass, as if that would make the scene look less incriminating. The SUV came to a stop about 20 feet away. The engine cut off. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than any that had come before. It was the silence before the judgment. All 5 bullies stared at the vehicle, their confidence evaporating like mist in the sudden glare of the sun. They couldn't see inside the heavily tinted windows. They had no idea who was in there, or what was about to happen. They just waited. The driver's side door opened. A booted foot hit the grass. Then a man emerged. He was not Officer Miller. He was a man they had only seen in the newspaper when he was sworn in, or at a distance during a school assembly about drug awareness. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his crisp, navy blue uniform. His face was granite, utterly expressionless. But his eyes were like 2 chips of blue ice, sweeping over the scene, taking in every detail: the rope, the tear-streaked face of his daughter, the scattered belongings, the cracked photo frame on the ground. He didn't look at the bullies. Not yet. His gaze was fixed on Alara. Her own eyes widened in a mixture of shock, relief, and a new, different kind of fear, Fear for what her father might do. Brad, trying to regain control of the situation, took a step forward. "Officer, sir," he began, his voice artificially bright. "This isn't what it looks like. We were just hazing her. For the team. You know how it is. It's all in good fun." Chief Carter's head turned slowly, mechanically toward Brad. The movement was so controlled, so devoid of any unnecessary motion, that it was more intimidating than a shout. He still said nothing. He just looked at Brad, his gaze dropping to the boy's varsity jacket, reading the name stitched over the heart, memorizing his face, imprinting it into his memory forever. The silence stretched, becoming a physical pressure on the bullies. They shuffled their feet. Jake looked like he was going to be sick. Chloe had secretly slipped her phone into her pocket. Chief Carter finally moved. He walked past them as if they were ghosts, as if they were utterly beneath his notice. He went straight to the tree, to his daughter. His entire demeanor changed the moment he was close to her. The granite mask softened, just around the eyes. He reached out, his big, capable hands, usually holding a firearm or a steering wheel, going to the ropes that bound her. He didn't fumble. He didn't rush. He examined the knots with a cold, professional detachment. "Alara," he said, his voice low and steady, a rock in her churning sea of emotion. "I'm here, baby, I'm here." She let out a choked sob, the sound of her relief finally breaking through. He worked at the knots, his fingers moving with a precise, practiced efficiency. In less than 30 seconds, the main bindings around her torso were loose. He carefully unwound the rope, his touch gentle as he freed her arms. The moment her wrists were loose, she fell forward into his chest, her body trembling uncontrollably. He caught her, holding her tight, his arms a fortress around her. He could feel the violent shudders racking her frame. He closed his eyes, holding her, letting her cry, absorbing her pain. Over her shoulder, his eyes opened again, and they found Brad. And in that look, there was a promise of a reckoning. He guided Alara gently toward the passenger seat of the SUV, helping her inside, wrapping a blanket from the back seat around her shoulders. He closed the door, sealing her in the safety of the vehicle. And then he turned back to the 5 teenagers. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The gentle father was gone. In his place was the chief of police, a monument of cold, hard authority. He walked back toward them, his steps slow and measured. He stopped a few feet away, his hands on his utility belt. "Names," he said. The single word was not a request, it was a command, flat and hard. The bullies stared at him, frozen. "Your names." Now, one by one, they stammered them out. Brad Wilson, Mike Reynolds, Jake Peterson, Chloe Miller, Sarah Jones. He didn't write them down. He didn't need to. He would remember. He looked at each one as they spoke, his gaze holding theirs until they looked away, shamed and terrified. "Do you have any idea," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "what the penalty is for unlawful restraint, for assault, for making terroristic threats? These are not schoolyard pranks. These are felonies. You are looking at felonies." Brad, ever the fool, tried to speak again. "Sir, with all due respect, my father, your father," Chief Carter interrupted, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more frightening than a scream, "is not here. Your social status is not here. Your varsity jackets mean nothing to me. The only thing that matters right now is that you assaulted and restrained my daughter." The word, "my daughter," landed like a bomb. The color drained from Brad's face so completely he looked like a ghost. My daughter. The police chief's daughter. The reality of what they had done, and more importantly, to whom they had done it, crashed down upon them with the force of a physical blow. Mike actually whimpered. Chloe started to cry. This was no longer a run-in with a friendly local cop. This was a catastrophic, life-altering mistake. "You will not move," Chief Carter said. "You will not speak. You will stand right here and you will wait." He turned his back on them, a gesture of utter contempt, and walked to his SUV. He got in on the driver's side. But he didn't drive away. He picked up his radio. His voice was calm, professional, but the words he spoke sent a new wave of terror through the group. "Dispatch, this is Unit 1. I need multiple units at the high school athletic field, Code 3. I have a 1096, multiple juvenile suspects, and a victim. Felony unlawful restraint and assault confirmed. Suspects are in custody." He gave their descriptions. The sound of distant sirens began to wail, growing rapidly closer. From inside the warm, safe cabin of the SUV, Elora watched through the window. She watched the 5 bullies standing frozen in a group, their swagger and bravado completely gone, replaced by pure, undiluted fear. She saw the flashing red and blue lights of 3 squad cars as they skidded to a halt on the field, officers spilling out. She saw her father get out again and speak to his officers, pointing, giving quiet commands. She saw the officers, their faces stern, approach the group. She saw Brad being handcuffed, the metallic click audible even from inside the car. She saw him protesting, his voice a high, pitched whine, and an officer firmly guiding his head down as he was placed in the back of a squad car. One by one, they were all cuffed, read their rights, and led away. It was not a satisfying spectacle of revenge. It was a clinical, legal, and utterly devastating process. It was justice, cold and impersonal, and it was far more powerful than any shouted threat or act of violence could ever have been. Later that night, the house was quiet. Elora was wrapped in a blanket on the sofa, a mug of hot tea untouched on the table beside her. The physical marks from the ropes were already fading into bruises on her wrists, but the deeper wounds would take longer to heal. Her father sat beside her, not speaking, just being there, a solid, comforting presence. "They're all being charged," he said softly. "Their parents are hiring lawyers. It's going to be messy, but we will see it through. Every step." Elora nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I was so scared, Dad," she whispered. "I know, baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know. But you were so brave. You survived it. And now they have to face what they did. Not as a prank, but as a crime." He paused, looking down at her. "That scar on your face," he said gently. "It's from the car accident that took your mother. It's a mark of survival, of strength. They saw it as a weakness. They were wrong. So profoundly wrong." It was the first time he had spoken of it so directly since they had moved, since they had tried to start over. And in that moment, something shifted inside Alara. The shame she had carried, the desire to hide, began to melt away, replaced by the first, faint glimmer of the strength her father always told her she possessed. The story didn't end with that single afternoon. The court case that followed was the talk of the town. The bullies, once at the top of the social ladder, found themselves ostracized, their futures irrevocably altered. Brad, as the ringleader, faced the most severe consequences, his college scholarship offers rescinded, his name forever associated with the incident. But for Elara and her father, the true conclusion was quieter. It was found in the way Elara began to hold her head a little higher when she walked the school halls. It was in the small group of friends who, inspired by her quiet dignity, gravitated toward her. It was in the newfound respect the town had for their quiet, serious police chief, a man who upheld the law with unwavering integrity, even when it involved his own flesh and blood. It was a story of pain, yes, but more than that, it was a story of a bond between a father and a daughter, a story of justice that was not swift and brutal, but patient, precise, and ultimately more transformative than any act of revenge could ever be. The tree on the field still stands, but no one ties anyone to it anymore. It serves as a silent reminder that cruelty always underestimates the quiet strength of its targets, and that sometimes the most powerful force in the world is a love that arrives not with a scream, but with a steady, unyielding silence, ready to dismantle your torment, knot by knot. This story was about finding strength in our darkest moments, and the power of having someone who will always show up for you. I'd love to know where you're watching from, and what you thought of this moment of justice. So, from which part of the country are you watching this video? Let me know in the comments below.